We eat at Disneyland quite a bit, and we usually enjoy Disney's sit-down restaurants, but unfortunately, this experience at Cafe Orleans was probably one of our most disappointing experiences yet. Cafe Orleans was actually once a favorite of ours, but our last 2 meals just haven't lived up to what we remembered it being, and this last visit was particularly disappointing. Now, I don't want to completely write off Cafe Orleans. It may still be a great option for some people, and I can absolutely see why people love it. But in this video, we're going to walk you through what happened, what we ordered, and whether I think Cafe Orleans is actually worth your time and money. Cafe Orleans is located right in the heart of New Orleans Square, so as soon as you walk up, you really do feel like you've stepped into a little piece of the French Quarter. There's both indoor and outdoor seating, and at first glance, it definitely has the feel of a nice sit-down restaurant without quite as much commotion as you might find at a quick service location. We had a 6:10 reservation and were able to check in about 10 minutes early, around 6 o'clock. We then waited until our name was called and were seated around 6:20. We were led to an indoor table, which was actually great because it was a pretty hot day outside. The inside was nicely decorated and had that quaint New Orleans style restaurant feel. I will say that when we first sat down, there was a noticeable stale smell around our table. It wasn't overwhelming, but it definitely wasn't particularly pleasant. We were seated at one of the corner tables, which was comfortable for our family, although the table itself did feel a little sticky, which wasn't the best first impression. One thing I will give them credit for is that although there were quite a few people waiting to dine, we were seated within about 10 minutes of our reservation time, which was a nice positive. Unfortunately, this is where our experience really started to go downhill. We placed our order at 6:27 p.m. and our food didn't arrive until shortly after 7. So we waited over 30 minutes for our meal. By the time the food finally arrived, we were definitely ready to eat and we were still excited to try everything. But unfortunately, the food itself didn't quite live up to our expectations. Our first dish was the crispy Chicken Cutlet Alfredo Pasta, and this was the dish we were most excited to try. We'd never had it before, and we'd seen plenty of videos where it looked really delicious. What we liked was that the portion was a reasonable size, the Alfredo sauce itself was decent, and the chicken was crispy when it arrived. But what we didn't love was that the chicken was surprisingly flavorless. The Alfredo sauce didn't have a whole lot of depth of flavor, and overall the dish just felt pretty ordinary. There wasn't really anything about it that stood out. So would we order it again? Probably not. It wasn't bad, but for a dish we were really looking forward to, it just didn't leave much of an impression. Our rating is a 5 out of 10. Next, we tried the NOLA BBQ Shrimp, which was another dish we'd never ordered before. It's served over a house-made cheddar biscuit, and this one definitely had more flavor than the Alfredo. We liked that the shrimp had good flavor, were a decent size, and cooked well, and the cheddar biscuit was flavorful and probably one of the stronger components of the dish. But what we didn't love was that once everything came together, the dish became pretty soggy, the textures didn't work particularly well together, and although we finished the dish, it wasn't something that made us want to order it again. So would we order it again? Probably not. There were definitely individual components that we enjoyed, but overall the dish just didn't come together in a way that really worked for us. Our rating is a 4 out of 10. And then there was the Monte Cristo, which was probably our biggest disappointment. We've had it before and remembered really enjoying it, and I remember it being crispy on the outside, warm and gooey on the inside, with that really nice combination of sweet and savory flavors once you added the preserves. Unfortunately, ours just wasn't like that this time. What we did like is that the preserves were still a nice complement to the sandwich, the seasoning on the fries was good, and the fry dip was actually really tasty. But there was a lot about it that we didn't love. The biggest issue was that the Monte Cristo was barely warm. Because it wasn't hot, the meat inside was cool, and the cheese had that texture of previously melted cheese that had since cooled and hardened. The bread wasn't warm or crispy either, so instead of having that warm, fried texture we remembered, it almost tasted like a cold beignet. The fries were also stale and were not warm. So would we order it again? Not based on this experience, and I do want to emphasize that I can absolutely see how this dish could be much better when it's freshly made and served hot because the flavors themselves were there. Unfortunately, the temperature and texture really took away from the dish for us. Our rating is a 2 out of 10. Overall, the biggest issue with the food wasn't necessarily that every dish tasted bad, it was that nothing really felt like it was executed particularly well. Between the long wait, the lack of flavor in some dishes, and the temperature and texture issues with others, the meal just didn't live up to what we'd expected from a restaurant we had previously really enjoyed. So ultimately, was Cafe Orleans worth the time and money? For us, unfortunately, I would say no. We spent about 90 minutes total at the restaurant, and when you combine the long wait for our food, the minimal service, and the food arriving barely warm, we just didn't feel like the experience justified the time or the cost. And that's really where Cafe Orleans lost us. When you're at Disneyland, your time is valuable. Even if you don't expect every Disney meal to be incredible, you're still spending money and giving up valuable park time to sit down and eat. For us, if we're going to spend that much time and money on a meal, we'd rather choose a restaurant where we feel like the food and service justify the experience. Alright, so getting into our final ratings, the food was a 3 out of 10. Unfortunately, the food just wasn't up to par for us. Waiting over 30 minutes for food that arrived barely warm, combined with some of the flavor and texture issues we'd experienced, was really disappointing. The service was a 4 out of 10. Overall, our service felt unusually slow and pretty impersonal compared with what we're accustomed to at Disneyland. Our server was friendly and polite, but the overall service was very minimal. There wasn't much interaction or checking in, and there was no acknowledgement that our food had taken such a long time to arrive. The atmosphere is a 4 out of 10. The air-conditioned indoor seating was definitely a positive on such a hot day, and the restaurant itself is nicely themed. But between being tucked into the corner and the stale smell we noticed at our table, the atmosphere just wasn't what we'd hoped for. As far as value for our meal, we'd rate it a 2 out of 10. Our meal ended up costing $95.90, and with our Magic Key discount, it came out to about $82 before tip. And for us, spending around $82 for this particular experience just didn't feel like a good value. Considering everything, we'd probably rate our overall experience a 2 out of 10. It's pretty hard for us to say that because Cafe Orleans used to be a restaurant we really enjoyed. We really hope this was just a one-off experience and that maybe we'll have a much better experience if we decide to come back in the future. But for now, I think we'll be taking a break from Cafe Orleans for a while. Hope this helps you plan your next trip to Disneyland. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe to Castle Hoppers for more Disney and family travel reviews, tips, and experiences.